Southern Miss lands Ole Miss wide receiver from the transfer portal. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. The travels through South Florida continue. We're between two ferns. Is that show taken? We'll talk about Southern Miss landing the big wide receiver out of the transfer portal. Also, more of the transfer portal. We want to look into the Cajuns quarterback. We want to talk about Georgia Southern, right? We're going to have this, the Sunbelt Conference play starts, this week, and Georgia Southern still doesn't have a victory. And let's look into that 4-7 bowl record. Texas State looking to improve that. The best the Sunbelt can do is 5-7. It's better as of late, but it didn't start out that way. Not at all. All right. So meanwhile, Will Hall, let's be honest, probably barely hung on to his job at Southern Miss. He had to give up the offensive coordinating duties. Split that up, hiring an offensive coordinator. I think they hired a new defensive coordinator. And Will Hall is staying at Southern Miss. I'm a big fan of Will Hall and like the direction the team was going in. They just had a quarterback issue, right? They've never been able to settle on a quarterback issue. And I'm not even sure, his big-time recruit, Ty Keys, has found a home yet out of junior college. So that's the big issue, is that they've really never had a quarterback that they could rely on, right? Having that discussion with the Cajuns and what's happened over the last couple of years, but compared to the previous 3 years, is that, Levi Lewis started all 39 games of the last 3 years. Meanwhile, the Cajuns, the last 2 years, have started 3 different quarterbacks in both seasons due to injury. And it's tough to be consistently good when that's the case. All right, so what happens? They keep Will Hall, and he ends up getting the best recruiting class in, for 2024. And I don't even think it was all that close, to be honest with you. Let's see what we got here. We have issues. Does anybody else have issues with, all of a sudden, Arkansas State has taken the top spot. They must have gotten a couple more recruits. 24/7 Sports. Southern Miss has 20 commits. So Arkansas State was close. But Southern Miss had the top class for a bit. This is overall. And now they're second behind Arkansas State. We're getting mosquitoes here. We're getting eaten up a little bit here. All right, so Southern Miss actually has a pretty good overall rank, 82. When you're doing a recruiting class, that's pretty good for a team that had that kind of season and what it's been the last few years. Although they did win a bowl game, right, in Mobile a couple of seasons ago. But now they get a nice little, they get a big-time transfer, and it means something. They get a kid out of Mississippi, I think Moss Point, and he went to Ole Miss. He's Larry Simmons, has not played very much. I think he played one game in his freshman year and didn't play very much in his second year at all. And so he still should have, 3 years of eligibility to be at Southern Miss. And that's he was a 3-star recruit kind of across the board from On3 to ESPN to Rivals to 24/7 Sports. And that's a big time get for Will Hall. When you are able to get, Southern Miss, and we've discussed this, right, where Southern Miss kind of has its own fan base, right? It doesn't feel like it relies on, Mississippi State or Ole Miss fans. They have their own fan base that we're impressed with, whereas, the Cajuns in South Alabama seem to compete directly with the SEC teams in their states. And Southern Miss has, obviously not as big as the SEC schools, but they have their fervent fans, which we saw in baseball last year, or earlier this year, I should say. And it doesn't rely on the other schools. And so now to go get somebody from Ole Miss is huge. And that kind of it does give Will Hall and Southern Miss some momentum heading into the new year. You still have room for more transfers. You still have more room to sign guys at signing day. And you can say, hey, stay home, play for us, right? There is the problem with the Ole Misses and the Mississippi States trying to compete in the SEC is, they just don't have as much talent in that state as an LSU does, as an Alabama does, or a Georgia does, or a Florida does. So they have to go out of state to get it. If Will Hall can land a few guys in state, that's huge, right? Stay home, play for us, and, play right away, right? You may not be sitting behind, 3 or 4 wide receivers, and you'll get a chance. And so we have to see who they commit to quarterback-wise. That'll be a big deal moving forward, I believe, in Will Hall's 4th season. So that'll be a big deal. That's called a segue. Speaking of quarterbacks, now, I don't think it's been quite a week since Zeon Chris went into the transfer portal. The Ragin' Cajuns quarterback announced he was going in the transfer portal on National Signing Day. Now, that was up against the holiday and the holiday weekend, but it kind of looked like someone put a bug in his ear and he was going to sign right away because the timing is just kind of interesting. I know it was after the bowl game. Maybe he doesn't want to, be a distraction, but it was, a few days after the bowl game, right? I mean, we had Jaden Voisin after South Alabama won. He went in the transfer portal the next day, right? Which is great. Go get some cash, see if it works out. Wishing you all the best. Like Zeon Chris could have done that, right? He could have announced on Sunday or Monday or Tuesday, but he waited till signing day, which was really interesting. And I'm still not convinced he's leaving. I know he's in the portal. I think he wants to leave. I think he wants to see if he can cash in. We'll see. The longer the music plays and he doesn't end up somewhere, we'll see. Now the Florida State backup quarterback, right, who filled in for Jordan Travis is in the portal. He's got some stiff competition. So we'll see. To me, with all due respect to everybody else, it'll be very disappointing if he ends up at another Group of 5 school, leaving the Cajuns behind. Whereas, he's going to be the guy you would think at UL. He would be. And you would think that he could land, it's not going to be a 7-figure deal. I'm not even sure it could be a 6-figure deal, but a high 5-figure deal could have kept him in Lafayette. So we'll see. Again, it's another, not a holiday week, but a holiday weekend. This thing starts to seep into January. We'll see. And maybe Zeon Chris has got to make a decision by then. We'll see if he decides to come back. The longer this goes on, the better chance he has to coming back. The Cajuns have for coming back. And remember, if you're the Cajuns, go do what you need to do, right? But just keep in the back of your mind Jordan Brown, right? He wanted out. He was the MVP of the Sun Belt Conference tournament. He helped us to the NCAA tournament. Ended up at Memphis right before, the last day, before the portal was closing to come out of it, and it just didn't work out. So the longer this goes on, and I don't know anything. I don't know if, who he's got offers from. And I keep on checking the Matt Zenuses and the Pete Thamels of the world. Maybe something happens later today. I do not know. But it's just interesting that he went in there at an interesting time. Hasn't come out yet. Was there an offer and then it didn't come through? Did they get another quarterback? So I don't know. I don't have any idea. But it just feels like if he was going in when he did and didn't come out of it ASAP, he's kind of, testing the waters and see if there's anything out there for him. And if there's not, come back to the Cajuns, be the guy, again, get a solid 5-figure deal and see what you can do over the next couple of years for the Louisiana Ragin' Cajuns. That's the deal there. So Southern Miss with a big transfer portal wide receiver in. We know the Cajuns with the quarterback transfer portal out. We'll see if Zeon Chris decides to come back. Again, don't know anything, but it just feels like the timing is a little bit not suspect, but interesting to me that nothing has happened yet. I understand that the holiday weekend was there and everything, but we'll see if anything happens before the new year. Boy, if nothing happens before the new year, I would say January 2nd, he's going to be back to the Cajuns. That's my prediction. All right, he's got another week to figure this out. We'll see if anything happens. All right, when we come back, we will transfer. We'll actually transfer. Bad. Didn't mean that. We will switch to basketball because although Texas State, and we did that preview game in football, one more bowl game for the Sun Belt, Georgia Southern's looking for their first win. When are they going to get that? Because it may be a minute. Is this one mosquito killing me? It may be a minute before they get it if they don't get it in their next ball game. All right. Let's take a timeout. When we come back, we'll talk a little Georgia Southern Eagles hoops on Locked On Sunbelt. Let me tell you a little bit about eBay Motors. Well, hey, all right, it worked. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all of the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easier to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, Dave Schultz. Well, premature rejoin there. Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. We'll look at the 4-7 bowl record, which has not been good for the Sunbelt. We will do that after we talk about Georgia Southern basketball. So remember, two Alabama head coaches, two Alabama assistant coaches, Brian Hodgson with Arkansas State, and Charlie Henry took over Georgia Southern. All right, Brian had a nice win. In fact, there's a couple of nice wins lately. A big one at Louisville. All right. Now, Louisville is a mess, but that's not Arkansas State's problem. Arkansas State went on the road and beat a Power 5 ACC traditional power. All right. Louisville's not traditional this year, but they went on the road and hammered Louisville. All right. They're still 4-8, but seem to be pointed in the right direction. On the other hand, Georgia Southern, we don't know what direction they're pointed in. They did cover against Tennessee. We made a little bit of money on that, but they lost to UNC Wilmington at home and scored a grand total of 42 points against Florida Gulf Coast in a loss 53-42 before Christmas. Now they have the Sun Belt starting, and usually it's 2 games at home, right? A Thursday and a Friday, or a Thursday and a Saturday, right? And you usually get 2 games at home and then 2 games on the road, or it could be 4 games on the road, 4 games at home, something along those lines. Well, they start off with Southern Miss. All right. Southern Miss just took it on the chin to Ole Miss. Southern Miss has kind of not had a great season. Austin Crowley only averaging about 15 points a ball game. They are 6-6. So they've had an up and down season. They lost to McNeese. I'm not sure they've beaten anybody of substance yet. They did beat UAB in Birmingham. So that's a nice little win. Okay. So they haven't been great either. That may be an opportunity for Georgia Southern to win a game, because winning on the road, I'm a big believer, winning on the road in all college sports is really hard. And for a team that's 0-12, it's going to be a little bit harder. And so could they pull a win on the road against these other teams that may or may not be improved, but none of them have winning records as of this podcast? After Southern Miss on the 30th, they play on the 4th at Arkansas State. So that'll be 2 former Alabama assistant coaches going at it. And as of right now, they're 4-8. Monroe is after that. And Monroe is 4-6. Then they come home for a little bit, although no games. Then they go on the road to Marshall, who's 5-8, and they haven't been as good as they were last year. And then they take it's an odd trip. They're going from Marshall to Atlanta to take on Georgia State. All right. And Georgia State seem to be doing a little bit better. They are 5. Do I have that right? 5-6. They're 5-6. Not sure. They have beaten Little Rock a couple of times, and they went on the road to beat Western Michigan, but they've lost to Mercer, who South Alabama dismantled, and they took it on the chin to number 18 BYU, which is probably not too surprising. But again, winning on the road is really hard. And so does Georgia Southern have to win this ball game at home to beat Southern Miss, or are they starting out 0-17 Is that what it's going to be? Because then Coastal Carolina comes to town, and they're no great shakes right now. They're 3-8, right? And they went through a coaching change, Cliff Ellis retiring earlier in the month. And then they get Georgia State at home. Then they hit the road again for App State and Old Dominion. Somewhere along the way, Charlie Henry's got to make sure it's not getting in these kids' head, right? Kind of like, you got to see one go in. They are still playing hard, right? I mean, the Tennessee line was like 34, and they lost by 18, right? They lost by 5 at home to UNC Wilmington and 11 to Florida Gulf Coast, although Florida Gulf Coast is no great shakes these days. But, you start going 0-13, 0-14, 0-15, and it's a tough stretch. If they had 1 on the road and then 4 at home, I'd feel a little bit more confident in what is going forward. But we're going to keep an eye on this. They have covered a couple of times, right? They did cover against Tennessee. I'm not sure they covered against Florida Gulf Coast. Now, they were actually favored against Florida Gulf Coast 2.5. So it's a tough stretch for Charlie Henry. I know it's a one-at-a-time deal, but it's really important to get this win against Southern Miss. Otherwise, it may be a minute before they get a win, period. After Southern Miss, their next home game is January 18th. So about 3 weeks from right now. So they need to get the win on the 30th, or it may be a minute. They may start out 0-17. So let's see if they can pull off some magic, regroup after the holidays, and get that first victory. Because, it's looking like bad season for Georgia Southern right now. I will say again, watching the Tennessee ball game, the guys were still playing hard, right? At one point in time, they were playing really close, and then it kind of fell apart a little bit. But they were playing hard towards the end. They were down by a bunch, almost 30, and I think they cut it to single digits right before Tennessee may have had to put in some starters. All right, let's take a timeout. When we come back, we'll recap that Sunbelt 4-7 record in the bowls. Not great, Bob. And then you still have Texas State getting ready to play Rice later on today. We will do that after this. All right, again, special thanks to everybody who has subscribed. I know this episode is a little bit late. We'll hopefully have the Texas State Bowl recap for tomorrow's episode on time. Doing a little traveling here while I have some time, but really appreciate everybody who has subscribed to the channel. It continues to grow. Thanks for checking out the reels and all the shorts that we've been posting as well. Please, tell your friends about the Sunbelt channel, the Locked On Sunbelt channel on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you can find, Locked On Sunbelt wherever you get your audio channels. It is sincerely appreciated. We're getting really close to 1,100 subscribers. We'll see if we can do that by the end of January, maybe even 1,200 by the end of January as we shift into basketball here. We may shift into basketball as of Wednesday, right? The football is over, although we still have signing day and more transfers. So we will certainly keep you up to date on what is happening on the football side, although basketball is probably going to be first and foremost. But again, thanks for subscribing, and let's keep it going. All right, Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Quickly, let's recap the Sunbelt Bowl results. It has not been good at all. Be honest with you, at all, okay? Started off with Georgia Southern not showing up in the first half, and we've discussed that. They were not prepared to play Ohio. They put on a little bit of a show in the second half, but made it a 2-score game with the ball and had a chance to make it a 1-score ball game and never got that close. They lose 41-21. Next up, I believe, was App State, and they were playing in a downpour. They survived. I think 6 turnovers between the two teams, between App State and Miami of Ohio, and App State survives 13-9. And again, I think Sean Clark and the Mountaineers had a heck of a season, had some really tough losses in there. And Joey Aguilar, had a great season. We'll look for big things for him for next season. Then the Cajuns had that back and forth ball game again. The teams that lost, I think, they played the best. It seems that, people are complaining that the offense didn't do well. and they didn't, right? You can't mask that. But if the Cajuns came up with a fourth turnover or a fourth defensive score and they won by 3 or 6 in overtime, what is the perception then, right? Win and move on? It's a very thin line. I think they played pretty well and came up just short, right? They didn't play well on their possession in overtime. They missed a field goal from a reliable kicker, and they lose in OT by 3. All right. I thought the defense made some stops in the fourth quarter, could make one when it mattered. I still think they played a well of a ball game, but they came up just short. All right. And then you had Old Dominion blowing a 28-0 lead. I mean, you can't do that, right? They blew a 28-0 lead. They had some bad calls against them, some phantom defensive PI calls that maybe should have been offensive PI calls. That doesn't change the fact that they scored 28 points in the first half and scored 7 points in the second half, including OT. Right? You can complain all you want about what happens on defense, but on offense, when you don't put anything on the board, then that leads to losing 38-25, right? They missed at least 3 field goals. 2 were blocked. 1 was missed. You had 1st and goal on the 1 in overtime and did not score. That has nothing to do with bad calls. You may be in overtime because of the bad calls, but if you got 1st and goal on the 1 in overtime, you should not be doing anything less than at least double overtime unless they go for 2 at the end. That's it. But they end up getting an illegal procedure penalty, which it was, and then miss a field goal. And then Western Kentucky does the same thing that Jacksonville State did, kick a field goal after getting it in close, and they beat Old Dominion 38-35. So at this point in time, the Sun Belt is all of 1-4. All right. It did not go well on Tuesday when he had UTSA up against Marshall in what I would call the Legacy Bowl, right? You had Cole Pennington and Cade McNown's kid, Owen McNown, playing a quarterback. And it was a little bit of a ball game, 21-17 at half. And then, some turnovers and some questionable decisions by Marshall. And UTSA runs away with it 35-17. All right. So now all of 1-5. Half of the bowl games are gone, and you're 1-5. Well, then we turn to Saturday, and Troy, with a lot of their coaching staff, going to be going to Tulane. That was announced. That wasn't something that Troy fans appreciated. Some guys opted out, including their leading tackler, but Gunnar Watson was sick. Tough for stomach flu to perform athletically, and Kamani Vidal kind of buttoned up a little bit in that ball game. They had a chance. They didn't get blown out by any stretch of the imagination. And they lose 17-10 to Duke. Give it up to Duke, right? They're playing with an interim coach. They're playing with a backup quarterback. But Troy didn't play up to what they are capable of. We know that. All right. Then so now it's 1-6 in the Sun Belt. Northern Illinois escapes Arkansas State 21-19. Not a whole lot of offense from the Red Wolves in the second half until late. Jalen Rayner finally leads them to a touchdown. They missed the 2-point conversion. I don't think the wide receiver was wide open in the back of the end zone, but he was certainly overthrown by a wide margin, not giving Arkansas State a chance to get the 2-point conversion. Then you get the onside kick, which they got, but were called offsides. I didn't like the call. I didn't think it was very obvious. We've had back and forth on Twitter, but Arkansas State ends up losing. I thought Butch Jones was classy. Not one call decides the game. You can't, Jalen Rayner was 50% passing on the day. Did not have his best game, and ends up being a good competitive ball game, right? Both teams were 6-6, and the ball game was decided by 2 points. That's what you're expecting. But Arkansas State loses, and now all of a sudden, Sun Belt is 1-7. Okay, or did I say that right? Let me see. Did I get that right? Let's see here. 1-3, 1-4, 1-5, 1-6. So now they're 1-6. Okay. James Madison, also Kurt Signetti not there. Their coaches are leaving. Their players are leaving, and they got run over by Air Force. A team that, gives up about 50 yards a game on the ground, gave up over 300 yards on the ground, and Air Force basically throttled James Madison in a ball game that was not particularly close. 21-14 at half. Air Force goes on to win 31-21. So now what is that? 1-7. Oh, boy. Okay. So then you get South Alabama at home, but no Carter Bradley out with an injury. LaDainian Webb out with an injury. And Colin Lacey has transferred to Louisville. The defense stepped up. In one of the more crazier seasons, South Alabama managed to score 50 points 3 times and still only went 7-6. It's a crazy season. But they hammered Eastern Michigan, up 38-3 at half, and the game was kind of overshadowed by the punch thrown by Corey Hernandez after the ball game. Certainly got a lot of publicity, whether it was wanted or not. I should mention that, the Eastern Michigan AD apologized. Joel Erdman accepted the apology, Dr. Joel Erdman, the AD at South Alabama. And then Corey Hernandez also apologized as well. So those apologies have been set. I would look for Corey Hernandez to maybe have a press conference or something along those lines and apologize again instead of a written tweet. But he has apologized, and we move on. But now the Sun Belt is 2-7. All right, still going. Georgia State, who I think actually played before South Alabama. And this one was, 35 points in the first quarter. 35 points in the first quarter. Georgia State up 21-14. They take a 31-14 lead into half, and they hammer Utah State 45-22. This is what Darren Granger was, right, throughout the season when they were starting out 6-1 and then fell off. Throws for 3 touchdown passes, throws for 250 yards, runs for over 100 yards, and scores 2 touchdowns. That's the Darren Granger that we know and love, and we wish him the best of luck. But he absolutely stepped up for Georgia State to get that win. Now 3-7, and then Coastal Carolina, right, playing a third-string QB, Ethan Vasco. There you go. Ethan Vasco, how about 20 of 33, almost 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. Again, I said it when I was picking it. I probably picked San Jose State to win, but I picked Coastal Carolina to cover because I've picked against Tim Beck, and it has not gone my way. And they go out to Hawaii to win. Again, that ball game, now without its controversy, Tim Beck took a promotional picture with the dance team. He's in his swim shorts, and they're in bikinis, and it was a big deal. I don't think it's a big deal. It was promoting the football game. He's standing on the beach, and they take a promotional picture with the dance team, but people think what they want to think. So Coastal Carolina gets the Sun Belt up to 4-7, and now you got Texas State at Rice, and Kef Giardello telling us that he doesn't think that any of the seniors have opted out. Is this right? Let me see. I'm hearing no Texas State seniors opted out of the First Responders Bowl today. No injuries either with a month between games. Haven't seen the Bobcats like this before the Baylor game. And, of course, he is with Win or Get Bent podcast. Kef does a great job covering the Bobcats. So you'll see if the Bobcats can win. They do have TJ Finley, and I like his attitude when he says, Bobcats fans have been waiting a long time for this ball game, and I'm going to play the game. We'll talk about my future later. So good for him. And we'll see how Ishmael Mahdi does as well. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Hopefully everyone's Christmas was a good one. We'll continue our South Florida travels and be back with you again tomorrow. I'm Dave Schultz, and you've been watching and listening Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day.